Thank you for waiting. Sorry, I'm like,
Welcome to Running Strong Mind Body Connection podcast. I'm your host, Karen Bonet Nataraj, and I'm so excited to be airing episode number 57. So thrilled you guys are here to join us, and please share it with other people. Let's get this podcast rocking. And today, my guest is Carolyn Murray, and this is going to be fun and exciting because you know what? I've never met her, but a great friend of mine gave me her Facebook link or gave me her information and said, "Hey, she'd be a great guest on your podcast." And so, uh, you guys know this is Running Strong Mind Body Connection podcast. I'm an athlete. A lot of people on this are athletes, but Carolyn, I think, is going to give us a whole wilderness adventure here. So, Carolyn, welcome to the podcast.
thank you very much, Karen, for the opportunity. Lovely to meet you. I'm not even sure where you are.
Oh, I'm in Auburn, California, in the United
Oh,
States. So tell our guests where you are and give our guests a little bit of insight of who you are and what you do.
so I am currently in the Falkland Islands, which is like in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean. So it's currently about 2 degrees and winter and very cold and rainy here. So I'm dreaming about like the Northern Hemisphere summer right now. So I kind of do two things. One is my first persona is I am the wilderness vet, and I work in lots of random locations around the world, which is kind of why I ended up here. I love adventures and working in remote places and doing crazy things. And I graduated in England, traveled quite a lot, and then have been working in New Zealand on and off for about 20 years before I came to the Falkland Islands, where I'm here, not really sure how long I'm here for at the moment. And then the other thing I do, based on my what happened to me, which is actually a miracle that I'm still alive, is I do health coaching for females, like holistic health coaching based on like the brain body connection and like the brain body gut connection and how all that ties in with hormones and nutrition and diet and stress and trauma and lots of things that happen to you in life, and pain. So the reason I did this is because I had a back injury in 2019 that was really bad, and basically like changed the whole course of my life. And so I couldn't walk for like nearly 2 months, couldn't work for over a year, have never really been able to return to my normal job. And I realized during the way that this happened in New Zealand, there was a complete lack of understanding of chronic pain, and how it affects, like, it's not just pain, it affects like your whole life and your relationships and finances and everything. And I was basically told by, I call them the people who call themselves specialists in the hospital very early on, that so at that point, I couldn't walk. I was like curled up in the fetal position in bed, bawling my eyes out, couldn't do anything. And they said, when you've been like this for 6 months, you can go to the pain unit and learn how to live with your pain. And I thought, I don't think so. So
Oh,
I
wow.
started doing my, so that's when I realized the medical system had no idea. And I started doing lots of research myself. And by chance, the thing that kind of catalyzed all this is I met a guy in hospital at the same time as me, who had had a very bad motorbike accident. And he had like broken bones, including ribs and things. And he wasn't taking any painkillers. And I thought, this is weird. And as I was shuffling past with my ketamine drip and on about 7 drugs that weren't doing anything for my pain, I said to him, like, what's all this about? And he said, oh, I've been in the army and they taught us to block out pain. And I said, what? And so he said, oh, read these things. And one of them was this guy, Australian guy called Lorimer Moseley, who's like this world famous physio. And he's written a few books, and one of them is Explain Pain. And long story short, it set me on this whole journey of that pain is actually like, there's no point prodding the sore bits like they traditionally do and giving you lots of drugs, because they don't always work. Basically, what we need to do is address the brain. And as a part of the journey, so I was given all these drugs, and one of them called pregabalin, which I think you call Lyrica. In some people, it's like a lifesaver. And in other people, including me, it causes like really serious damage to the hormone producing part of your brain. So my thyroid didn't work. My estrogen went through the roof, and I turned into, literally, I describe it as like the Medusa, you know, like with the Gorgon, with the snakes coming out. I went completely crazy. And I kept going back to the doctor saying something's wrong, and they kept telling me nothing's wrong, it's in your head. And then I got really sick and had to have a hysterectomy. And so more and more things kept going wrong. And so I started doing all this research into how all these things are connected, and ended up going to this pain specialist who literally saved my life and explained like the crux of everything, not just pain, like life, is you have to feel like safe in your own body. And until that happens, nothing is really going to work properly, and especially if you've had lots of trauma and injuries and things. And I had a horrific time in the hospital. I thought I was going to die in both hospitals because I didn't really receive proper care. So she set me on this path of kind of like exploration, and I had to change all my job. I couldn't work for nearly 3 years. Didn't have anywhere to live, didn't have any income. But bizarrely, Karen, what happened is I was always the person who used to ask everyone for help about things, and I still do. But then when I started, because as you can see, I like talking, when I started talking to women about these things, I met all these women along the way who were really sick. And because I'm a vet, I've got a good understanding of multiple body systems and how they work, and normal people don't. And so I knew what was wrong, and I kept going back to the doctor saying something's wrong. But I met all these women who were really sick and like couldn't work or just were not getting better. And then they started like asking me things. So now I like help other people. And some of my friends have, unfortunately in New Zealand, I'm not sure what it's like in other countries, like women's health, especially hormones, is not very well understood. So once you get to like 40 and over, you walk into the doctor's clinic and they just look at you and think you're like a perimenopausal nutcase and just ignore you and just say everything's due to that or stress. But as we're here to talk about running, one of the things that kept me going is I used to run a lot, and I went from like running like 3 times a week and running half marathons, and I've always done lots of hiking, to like I couldn't walk or move. And so I really wanted to like get running again. And I think the one thing that kept me going, that I think I've talked to a lot of people, and I did a talk a few months ago about chronic pain in the brain and things, and people were saying, you know, like, how can I get past this? And I think hope is like a big thing, and motivation. And like when you've done something and you really love it, and like obviously if you like your spine's severed or something, that's a whole different thing. But I knew like what I wanted to do. And so I just kept thinking like, how can I do it? How can I do it? And so I went from like not being able to walk. And then a few months ago, I did this amazing thing. I mean, nothing like the incredible things you've done, but I think this is like an example of like how the brain can like, you know, get you to where you want. So I hadn't run for quite a few years because the hysterectomy was a complete disaster. And I started running again in the summer. And only 1 month later, I did this run in the Falklands. It's called the Ultra, where you run like loops of about 7 kilometers, and you just have to see how many you can do. And I thought, well, I've only been running for a month. Like before, I was running for years, maybe like do 2 or maybe 3. And I did 5 loops, and I was like, there was only 3 women who like did a similar amount. And that's when I realized, like, this is all like the brain stuff. It wasn't because I was really fit. It was because mentally I'm probably 100 times tougher than what I was before, because during this whole thing, I had to have a lot of therapy because it was horrific, and a whole lot of other things appeared that I had to confront that were not very nice about myself that I had to deal with. And so, funnily enough, and I think I've met a few people who've said similar, when you've had a horrific injury, obviously I was lucky because I could still walk at the end, or horrific trauma, I'm probably a better person and much stronger mentally than I ever was before.
What an amazing story. Oh my goodness. And what a great gift that you can give to people. But I truly believe that, because our mind can be so powerful on the essence of what we think is what we're going to manifest. And if we change that thought, but the thing is, though, and the work that I do with the mental fitness is that we are normally based on fear. Our whole world is based on fear. And then we react in our life on fear. And if we can, and we can rewire our brain, and you have the neuroscience behind you on that idea. And it's powerful, because I remember growing up thinking, well, when you get old, your brain gets smaller and smaller and smaller till you die. And I'm like, there's so much more information these days. It's like it gets better and better and better. And you can actually rewire the brain from that constant amygdala hijack to becoming more in your prefrontal cortex and the empathy circuitry, and be in that peace and calm. And when you do that, your body, because there's a connection here, there's a true connection. And how powerful, though, to the person you met that went through the military to learn to shut off that receptor. And you can do that, the power of the brain, which will heal the body. And so, did they tell you you would never walk again?
They didn't tell me I would never walk again. They just kind of intimated that this level of pain was like how it was going to be. But the pain was so severe that I literally couldn't be conscious. I had to be like bombed off my tree on a lot of drugs, because it was nerve pain. And they didn't normally, also I was quite lucky, because normally surgeons run in and want to like start guddling around with a scalpel and cut things. But what I realized, because I had a really bad wrist fracture and horrific surgery on that, which is a whole nother story, quite a few years before, I realized that surgeons like doing that, but then they don't take any responsibility for if things don't go wrong after, because they're like, I've done my job. And so luckily I had a spinal surgeon who said, I'm not really sure why your level of pain is so off the charts. And I don't think that if I do surgery, because it was a disc prolapse, I'm necessarily going to help the pain. And I was kind of lucky, because I didn't have so much weakness. Like if I'd had not been able to use the leg because of the nerve squashing, that I think they would have had to do surgery. But he said, I don't want to, because I don't think this is going to really make any difference. And so he didn't, which is really unusual. But I did have a spinal injection, which caused more damage to another nerve. But long story short, I was lucky, because at the time I had the injury, I was very fit and I'd been running a lot. And I think that's one of the things that really saved me. Like, although I was extremely unfit by the time I'd recovered, at the time I had like a base level. And so I've always been kind of like quite highly motivated, and us independent single females realize like, ain't nobody coming to help us, so we have to sort this shit out ourselves. And when I realized that the medical system didn't know what they were doing, I was like, well, I'm a vet. I know how to do scientific research, so I'm going to have to find this out. And so I've learned lots of like super fascinating things. Another thing that was really interesting is, you know, how we all have different coping mechanisms. And one of mine was eating ridiculous amounts of chocolate, which it turns out is very bad for you if you've got pain, because it's so inflammatory. And so when someone told me, like, you really need to stop eating this ridiculous amount of chocolate, incredible. I was very skeptical that it would make any difference, but I did it for a month, not sure how, and my pain levels decreased by about 50% just from that.
Wow, yeah.
So that was really interesting.
That's a bummer because chocolate's so good.
I know. Well, moderation. When I worked out how much I was eating, it was quite frightening. And also because my estrogen levels were so off the charts because of the pregabalin, that made so high estrogen is inflammatory, and then the sugar on top was just a bit of a disaster. But on your comments about like the body feeling safe, that as you know, is like a game changer, because everyone keeps saying, you know, like talking therapy and CBT and everything, and you talk about it things, and like then it's almost sometimes you just re-traumatize yourself talking about stuff. And one of the things that the angel pain specialist told me is exactly what you were saying about how, you know, you can't really talk yourself out of these things. You have to make your body, you know, like your body needs to feel safe. So there's like the breathing and the meditation, and, you know, like the moment between response and react and stuff. And that was really, I found that as like a kind of sciencey geek, really fascinating. The other thing I found really helpful, which is kind of very controversial, because someone on LinkedIn wrote this very scathing comment recently when I wrote about it. I did, and I'm interested to hear your views, neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. And I found that was like also for me a huge game changer, because it identifies like the root cause of a lot of law. Like you were saying, fear is one of the biggest bases of where we operate from, and guilt and shame as well. And a lot of that is from adverse childhood experiences, which we kind of like stick in a box and be like, that was the crazy childhood, we're going to ignore that. But then it's quite common, as you've alluded to, when you get older, if something really bad happens, so in my case, the injury, and also my dad died really horrifically of dementia. And in all this period, so in 18 months, I had the injury, couldn't walk. My dad died after years of horrific illness, and 4 of my friends killed themselves. And so I almost had like kind of like complex PTSD from the whole thing. And so the NLP kind of really helped untangle, like, you know, what is, and so I was very angry about I couldn't walk or do anything, and the medical system wasn't doing anything, and I was really incapacitated. And then so it kind of digs down, okay, when's the first time you feel like anger and stuff? And then how do you get out of your own way to sort this out? And that all helps calm the circuits and harm the body. And literally, like, it did rewire my brain, because I used to be kind of quite, well, feisty, I would say the word is. And now I'm much more like regulated. And so it's really fascinating how when you look back at, like, you know, obviously we, like you were saying with the brains, I thought the same, oh, you get old and your brain shrivels up and you die. Right. But it's really fascinating how you can literally change your whole brain. And I almost got to a point where sometimes someone would say something and I'd be like, oh, normally that would make me really angry, but I'm not really kind of feeling that. And it's like, ding, like the stuff works. And I wouldn't say, you know, it's not an overnight thing, but I talked to lots of different people and used myself as like a case study of different therapies and stuff. And I think when you combine it with lots of other things, it really helps. And also, as you know, like we're here to talk about running, like how mentally therapeutic that is. And So for me with the pain specialist said, like, what do you really love? And so for me it was like being outdoors, like doing exercise in nature. And so when you like that and you can't have it because you can't walk, you're highly motivated to try and do that. And bizarrely, I was kind of this anomaly because although I had severe nerve pain, and I couldn't really stand up, I couldn't sit down for nearly 2 years, so I couldn't really go anywhere. The only times I didn't have pain were when I was kind of lying down in a weird position or when I was walking. And so they were like, this doesn't fit with the model. And so once I could get walking and then kind of gradually start running again, then as you know, like the endorphins come. And so when I did this like ultra run thing, I was like, oh my God, like I'm outside with the sun and the winds and, like feeling the sun on your skin, which doesn't happen much here. And you forget. And the pain specialist said to me, like when things hurt, because I had I don't know if it's called chronic regional pain syndrome. So it's basically where your nerves are super ramped up. So if someone does like this, it's like, ow. And so she said, and so when you start doing things like when I started the physio and redoing things, all my joints, my body was like, no, we don't like this. And just like small things, like even now, if I touch my kneecaps, it's like, ooh. It just like messes with your nerves. And so she said, concentrate on like a bit that doesn't hurt, like your left elbow or something. Because when you concentrate on one thing, you can't, like that diminishes the pain. And then during my recovery, I noticed like if I was laughing, which wasn't very much in the beginning, or listening to loud music I really love, or, or being outside in nature where you've got everything like you're looking at, it like distracts the brain. And so one thing I would say to people is, I know a lot of people need medications for certain things, and I still need stuff for other things. But when I stopped all of the 7 painkillers, there was no difference in my pain, apart from that I wasn't a complete zombie. And I'm a strong advocate of using like nature and, animal therapy and stuff, and being outside for like healing, just and because like the mind and the body are connected and you can't really have one good and not the other. And weirdly, like recently I've had some very unexpected stressful times, and where I thought I was kind of coping okay, but then I had like quite bad pain, or like my skin started falling off, and it's like your body, like the gabor mate, the body keeps the score. It's like your body is always one step ahead of what's happening, and it like reminds you like, this is not safe, or this is not okay, you need to do something about this. So it's so fascinating how everything links together.
It's super fascinating, and my gosh, you have an amazing story, and I really appreciate everything you're sharing. I had another peer coach who did the NLP, and we're kind of the same. So the mental fitness is just a different setup, and it's understanding how we sabotage ourselves. It's the thought processes, and we
Yeah.
learn about that. You learn deeper about the judge and the inner critic, and then the
Yeah.
saboteurs, and so. The realization, though, is, something that you did bring up, though, too, is that we learn these habits as a child because our parents, as the best they ever did, brought them into our lives. And in essence, like, don't do that. You're going to get hurt. Don't do this. You can't go out there. It's not safe. And we bring these messages into our little 4-year-old mind thinking, oh, I'm not good enough. I can't do that. I will get hurt. I'm going to stay small. And then I was in a traumatic family environment. So I would hide in my room and create a calm, peaceful world for myself. It was my own story I tell myself and make my room perfect and beautiful and on and on. That created that. We want to feel safe and secure. We want to feel loved. But in a child who is not in the best environment or even at any point in time, is that we always want to be safe. And I'm going to feel safe by telling myself, oh, I'm not good enough. I can't do that. Oh, don't. So I'll feel safe. But when we grow up as an adult, these are big words that are based on fear and and so as we're in relationships with my saboteurs, the inner critic was constantly keeping me small. Karen, you don't have a voice, you can't talk. And I'm like, yes, I can. My mother was always like, children are seen and not heard, so don't talk. And so it was a long time before it's like, I'd be so afraid to even speak because, and especially being on stage, it's like, oh my God, someone's going to see me and they're going to make fun of me and the heck with them. And so it's the stories we make up, and then that sabotages us as an adult. And so the other thing I truly believe too is we have the ability to heal ourselves. We have that ability because, and that, so I'm not, this isn't even science based. My own thought was like, all these people who can be hypochondriacs and talk them into being sick. Well, can't we talk ourselves into being well? And so it's just, and so as I've gone through all this coaching stuff and my own self-development, my own growth, is that yes, we can heal ourselves. And yes, we don't have to go down the proverbial path of drugs. And what a blessing to have the vet scientific background for yourself, to be that, like you said, a wilderness vet. How exciting. But we do, and we don't have to be that way. We don't have to be in a fear-based world because on top of that, that's the number one stressor. And then our body responds to that. So focusing on the pain, focusing on the pain, focusing on the pain, exactly what you're going to get. So what we focus on is what we're going to manifest. And so congratulations on running your first ultra. And I experienced that after I got into this, deeper into the coaching and the mental fitness and the holistic stuff. I'm running a 50-mile race. And some point I was like, oh, I'm all by myself. And I just focused, and we're in nature and you love nature. So this was in April and the purple flowers are blooming and everything's green and you can hear the river flowing and you can just see just the spring colors coming out. It's just spectacular event. And I was just focusing on my breath in unison with my stepping. And I had no aches and pains in my body, but I was in the flow of it. And it's made me a mile per hour faster because number one, I'm not focused on, oh my God, you're going too slow. And oh my God, my foot hurts. Oh, my legs are hurting. Well, just focus on your breath. Focus on the present moment as opposed to telling yourself these stupid stories. And a lot of the listeners know, I mean, there's an event that I did that is the crux of what came my um, coming out or whatever. It was a 100-mile race and I came in with 9 seconds. It was the feeling of being completely in the body and nothing else mattered. And knowing that I wanted to finish this, knowing that deep in my heart, it was in my bones that I wanted to finish this, but there were so many elements that went on with that created that scenario of me being on the track and running out of my element. And it's being in that flow, being in the present, being in connection with our mind and body. And it's a very powerful thing. At the end of it, it's like, I could have put on a cleaner shirt. I'm getting all these pictures. I look pretty shitty. but I didn't have time to do
Who cares? You
that.
did it.
But it's fascinating and your story's fascinating and it's a message that really needs to be out there and amazing how you can help other people do the same thing. And can you speak just a little bit? I'm just really curious because I actually had no idea what, this was going to go and what a great adventure. But Deborah, the person who brought us together, a mentor of mine, said that you were at the Iditarod.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, she ran the Iditarod? No, she was the vet at the Iditarod.
No.
And we have a good friend of ours, Biot is his name. Would you have happened to know any of the people in the race? He's done it, I don't know how many times, the Iditarod. But can you just like briefly go over that to me? That's just fascinating.
Yes. Can I just say before I go into that,
Yeah.
regarding Deb, I would just like to acknowledge what a massive influence she's had on my life. And
Yeah.
she was like you were saying about how, we should be seen and not heard. Like I had that as well, you need to shut up and everything. And then it's not until we like I had the same thing as you with the relationships. Like, why does no one get me? Why does it not work? Why are they all like not my people? And then I was like, oh, it's actually easier to be on my own, which obviously is not always healthy because as humans, we're wired to be connected to other people innately. Right. But Deb was the kind of person who like turned the key of the female empowerment thing because she's so inspirational. And I think like after we've had all these horrific things and learned how to de-sabotage and the judge and the inner critic and stuff, which I was like, and I was like, but that's normal now. And she was like, no. And that's the other thing with the childhood thing. It for us it's normal, like our childhood is normal because we don't know any better, and it's not till a few decades later when everything starts falling apart that you realize that stuff is not normal. I mean, no one's normal. What's normal? But there's certain things that should not happen, and like you were saying, like childhood trauma and domestic violence and parents fighting in front of you is not healthy for any child. But at the time you just think, oh, that's just what happened, and you don't realize for a long time. And sorry, I will get to the editorial, but I've just got these things that I need to say first. Deb was influential in turning the key of like, actually I have got a voice, and and I have got things to say, and I have got valuable information, and I can help people and stuff, and we don't just have to shut up. And I think as a female it's almost harder for us because we've got that on top of like all of the other kind of life stuff, if you have things going on as well. And I still find there's a lot of chauvinism in my profession, and definitely there was in New Zealand as well. And then you get labeled a feminist if you speak up. Like an assertive man is labeled as an assertive person, and an assertive woman who speaks up is labeled like a troublemaker or a feminist. So it's really interesting, the kind of nuances with people's perception.
Exactly.
And the breathing thing you reminded me actually was one of the key things. There was a brilliant book I read, I think it was just called Breathe, and in relation to the feeling safe thing, like a lot of us are with the amygdala hijack, we're constant like fight or flight, and we're doing the like sympathetic breathing, and so you can't feel safe when your body's like doing that.
Right.
That is like a whole nother thing that where I think meditation and stuff really helps. But I also and posture and things, it's just another thing that medicine just isn't really like, they don't have time for that. They're like, okay, you're feeling shit, here's some drugs, but often those drugs have lots of side effects as well. So back to the Iditarod. One of the most incredible things I've done in my whole life, haven't done it because I probably would die, but I was a volunteer vet on it. So I did it twice, and the first year was quite an adventure because I broke my wrist halfway through in the middle of a remote checkpoint and had to be bundled up and put in a sled. An emergency plane had to come that picked up me and some sled dogs, took me to a bush hospital where I had pethidine, which I can tell you is one of the best drugs in the world, and I can see why they don't give it anymore because it's so addictive. I can still remember the euphoric feeling I had, that although my bone was really badly broken, I felt amazing. And then so that didn't really go very well, and then I had to go home with a broken wrist, and that caused all the nerve problems. Then the second year I came back again, and they were thinking, oh my god, this is crazy. I was like the new vets. They took like rookie vets from different countries, so that wasn't a great start. So the second year I went back and did the race again, and then there was 15 years where I couldn't do it because of all that other stuff. And then I just did it again last year. And it was so good having a break, not good having a break, but every year it's different. Like there's people from all over the world doing it. And these mushers, there's people, who I admire immensely in the world. One is the pilots who land aeroplanes on ships who have balls of steel, and the other one is one of the other people is the people who do the Iditarod, the mushers, because it's like minus 50 degrees a lot of the time, 50-mile-an-hour winds, horrific wind chill, like colder than I've ever been, but it's like dry cold. And my friends used to say to me, like, but Caroline, you don't like cold. Why are you going to this like place where it's like cold and you're going to be outside in the snow? Like, what's going on? But you know, it's different, that whole thing. And also in New Zealand, they haven't really worked out yet that you actually need to build a house that's warm instead of just wearing 53 layers of clothes. And so I explained to them, you know, in Alaska and Canada, you have to have a decent building because you'll die in minus 50. So you have to have proper building. And a kind of related story to that along the sports thing, not so much the running, but I used to do long distance cycle races, which I was terrible at. But the way the Iditarod thing started is, and this is like, you know, at running events, you meet all these amazing people and you meet friends that you wouldn't meet normally. And so I did this cycle race in New Zealand and it was awful. And I was randomly talking to this guy at the end of it in New Zealand. And I just applied for my first year at the Iditarod. And I said, oh, yeah, I'm going to Alaska. I don't know anything about it. And they sent me this gear list, which was like crazy of, you know, you need to be equipped for minus 20. We don't have that in New Zealand. And he said, oh, my best friend, I've got my best friends. They're like a couple. They live in Anchorage. I'll introduce you to them. So I ended up going to stay with them. They lent me all their like sub-Antarctic gear. And we're now like really good friends. And every year I go to the Iditarod, I go and see them, and they introduce me to one of their other friends who loves hiking. So this is the beauty of like sports and travel and things, how it just broadens your mind. And that kind of thing as well, you know, obviously for introverts not, but like for people like us who love getting out there, that is really healing, just like connecting with people who, you know, like get you and like really love what you love. And I've met such incredible people. So the mushers are from all over, like the states and different countries. And then there was National Geographic guys there filming one year who are just like make the most incredible, like if they drop a lens, that's like $1,000 down the drain. Just and also on the other level of serious admiration, the Iditarod pilots are like out of this world. There was one of the times where I thought I was going to die was on the Iditarod when we had to make an emergency landing to check a dog. And we were going, so they all fly Cessnas, and these guys are amazing. Like some of them are ex-FedEx pilots or current FedEx pilots. One of them was an air-to-air refueling pilot with the US Air Force. Some of them are like cardiologists who've got lots of money and have got a plane that they really like flying. And so, but they all have got like serious flying skills, because half of the time they don't have radar and you can't actually see anything. You're just flying in a whiteout. And so we landed on this frozen lake to look at this dog, and it was really sick. And the pilot said, like, I can't leave the engine, I can't cut the engine out because we're going to get stuck. And there was nothing where we were, not even a checkpoint. So we looked at the dog, ran back in the plane, and we went to take off. And the wind was so strong, it was pushing, like, I could see his knuckles going white on the throttle, and the plane wasn't going anywhere. And because the wind was pushing it down, and these pilots are incredible, kind of like the guy who landed on the Hudson, like, yeah, I'm landing on the Hudson, like, calm out. What? And I said to this pilot, is everything okay? And he was like, everything's fine. And so eventually we took off, and it was very turbulent, and I was very airsick. And then we landed, and we were all okay. And by chance, I probably shouldn't be telling this story, but I will anyway. By chance, I was walking through like the office later that evening, and I heard the pilot who had flown us on the phone to his wife saying, I thought we were going to die. And I was like, oh, okay, interesting. But like at no point when we were on the plane with him had he indicated this.
Well, that's actually probably a pretty good thing.
Yeah. But when you first get on the plane, they say to you, all the emergency gear is here and it's normally in the tail. And I used to say, but we're not going to need that, right? Because we're going to be fine. And they'd be like, everything's fine. But they've got like, these sleeping bags for -80 and things. So the race, basically, it's 1,100 miles from Anchorage to Nome. And it goes through a lot of native villages. And each year it kind of alternates. There's a certain bit, so each of the villages kind of gets more like tourism and exposure and stuff, and so everything's an adventure on it. So we had like moose stew and smoked salmon jerky and whale blubber we had once. So it's just like this cultural adventure. And I met people there who were just like way out of the zone that I ever would have met normally. And, certain people, I found wherever I go, there's at least one person who I'm like friends for life with, like the sister from a different mother kind of thing, or brother from a different father or whatever. And then through them you meet other people. So I would highly recommend it. Well, either as even just as like a spectator, it's incredible. And we met this girl at one of the checkpoints. So some of the checkpoints are on the Yukon River, which is brutal. And we stayed in little villages where there was like 300 people, and they're just like, these people are subsistence hunters, and it's quite hard for them. There's not a lot of income all year round. So often the fathers of the family, because often they've got kids, they're away for almost half the year doing like forestry or working in oil or something else, just to get enough income to kind of like survive. And it's quite humbling to see, even in the 21st century, and these people, but they really know how to live off the land, and they live very sustainably. And it's a really good example of, how in the middle of climate change and lots of horrific stuff going on, almost like we've lost connection with nature. I mean, these people, so one girl fell off her sled in -30 at 3 a.m. and her sled dogs just took off without her. And she walked about 3 miles along the Yukon River in the middle of the night in like freezing fog and temperatures, and arrived. We were like, oh my God, we're going to have to like send her to hospital or something. She's going to have bits falling off her. And she just kind of like trotted in. Oh, that was a bit cold. Had like frost on her eyelashes. And even the male mushers were like, wow, this girl is like tough. So
where did talking about
go? So the reason we knew something had happened is we were in the village waiting for her to come in, and her dogs came screaming in with the sled without her. Oh, so wow. There was like this emergency, like, shit, where is she? We have to try and find her on the Yukon in the middle of the night. And so we kind of got people together to try and this is where the locals are so golden, because like they know everywhere, like we didn't know where we were going. And also the Yukon River is probably like a mile wide or something where we are, but in the winter you can walk and drive across it. They were landing planes on it. It's just wild. And then in the summer it's like this turbulent like mass. It's almost like so amazing. It's difficult to describe what an incredible experience it is, just from every facet. Yeah, we didn't have to go far because she kind of appeared. Luckily, because we were wondering how we were going to, because she had to walk through a forest, part of it, and it's not really very easy to see in a forest in the middle of the night and in -30. Also, they had the Northern Lights there, which were like spectacular. So, last year, I completely lucked out. And this is the kind of things I love about traveling and meeting new people and stuff, and like feeding your brain with social connections. I'd heard that some of the pilots, so you get to Nome and it's like the Arctic Circle. And I don't know if have you been there, Karen? It's like the Wild West.
Yeah.
So it's got like all these bars. and they're like saloon doors, and it's like something out of like a kind of crazy like movie, and everyone's drinking and partying, and it's pretty wild. And then they have muskox just outside the like settlement that you, so you have to be really careful wandering around because you don't want to run into a muskox. And lots of incredible wildlife there as well. And so some of the pilots then like fly back to various places. And last year I completely lucked out. There was a pilot that I'd never met before who came in and said, "Oh, you know, I'm flying back to Anchorage. So that's like a whole day of flying. It's like 400 and something miles direct. Does anyone, and I've got a spare seat in my plane because they really like company. Would anyone like to come with me?" And all the Americans were like, "Oh, no, I'm really tired. I just want to get home." And I was like, "Get out of the way. I'm coming on your plane." And so we had this like incredible day of flying like over the sea ice, over the Yukon, over the forest, like through all the checkpoints back to Anchorage. And then his plane, they park it in like it's like a little car park. You land and then like reverse the plane in and put all its little nose hood and its little cover on. It's just wild, incredible experience that I would encourage everyone to do. And you can, I think, go at certain checkpoints. Oh, and then we met this girl who had been snowshoeing or skiing. She just decided on her own, "Oh, I'll just like go off and do 400 miles along the trail just to see what it's like." And there was another guy working in one of the native villages who was from somewhere in the east, and he had arrived on a kayak just randomly on a river one day and ended up and being the chef at the village school. The most crazy stories that you can't even imagine.
I think you need to write a book.
That's on my long list. Deb said
Yeah,
that
right.
as well.
Wow, what an adventure in life. What an absolute adventure in life. And thank you for sharing that. Have you ever, besides Iditarod, do you know about the horse races and Tevis Cup or Vermont and their horse race here in the US?
So one of my friends has done the Tevis Cup. I think she's based in Oregon. She trains horses. Um, and I only know about that because I did another crazy adventure called the Mongol Derby, which is 1,000-mile horse race. Again, I did not do the race. I was a vet on the race. And so basically, it's like 1,000 miles across the Mongolian wilderness.
Wow.
And the people that do that are like next level. These horses are like semi-feral. You can only approach them from the left-hand side. You can't pick up their feet. You can't really do much. So treating them if they get unwell was quite an adventure. And the Mongolian, and after that, I went on holiday on a trip to the eagle hunters in the mountains, which was another like outer worldly experience of talking about people who like meld with nature. And like what you were saying, about the brain and happiness and exercise and stuff, these people, like, they're so fit, but like they don't have to go running or go to the gym because just to survive and live, they're like have to really exercise and be tough. But I noticed like how happy a lot of these people were who lived in the middle of nowhere because they didn't have the internet and first world problems, basically.
You don't have the
And they're
news.
outdoors all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a great way to live, though. But yeah, they don't have the news. That's what impacts most of our stress is all the media and the news and
Yeah.
Facebook and TV and on and on and on. Wow,
Mm.
how exciting. Good for you. Yeah, we have I go up and I volunteer at Tevis Cup and we volunteer. It's about the same course as what Western States 100-mile run is, and that's how Western States 100-mile run became a running race, and the horses
Oh,
do
wow.
the horse race a month after around the full moon. So I think it's July 20th, the middle of July, the 12th or the 13th, around that weekend. And so I've always seen it and I always wanted to work an aid station because I know what it likes to run it. Now I want to see a horse. And Red Star is one of the aid stations, and you can see the horses coming down on the switchbacks of the trails.
Oh,
And it's fascinating watching them because you have the horses that are trying to take over the other horses. You have horses who like, I don't care, we're going to trot. We have horses who are racing it. They're not stopping for nothing. And just watching the different types of horses and their attitudes. And this particular aid station they have vets there, and the vets just watch the horse leave or come in. And we had one horse that had like 4 IVs. And it's early in the race. It's only 15 miles in the race, but it's just whatever the horses do. And this guy was saying that horse would never stop to drink, he would never stop to do anything, would never stop. And so, the horse pays for it. And so, but I have high respect for the vets on what they do and taking care of the horses. And
mhm.
so Red Star is just a quick check. They watch them walk out, and if they're walking or they're lame or whatever, I don't know what that all means. And then I think Forest Hill is a rest check, and same with Robinson Flat is another. They have to stay there for like a half hour or something. It's a downtime big vet check, and then so is Forest Hill, and it was just fascinating. And I had the opportunity to ride up with Moore Livermore, who's this icon of Tevis and Western States, just in all the horses, and they're horse people and they know everything. And I'm this cocky little girl in the back seat. I don't want to ride a horse. And boy, was I put in my place, rightfully so. And it's like I just found, and I've heard so many things. I mean, there's people who have horse farms for mentally mental fitness kids, or kids who are
Yeah.
mentally off and have physical disabilities or whatever, and they're very, very therapeutic. But so we go up there now. I've been up there. This will be my fourth time this year to go up and work at Red Star, and it's so much fun. It is so much fun watching the other side of what the runners coming in.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you should
Well,
come to it sometime.
yes, I would love to. That sounds amazing. One of the things I forgot to mention with the Iditarod, well, one of the many things, and so they have checkpoints along the way as well. So different ones where we have to check the dogs. But there's also an Idita walk and Idita bike where insane, in my view, people walk and cycle through this like Arctic wilderness. And it's really interesting talking to them and like the mental resilience that, sometimes the snows up to their armpits and they have to carry their bike and stuff. And like, they are quite fast. So they do that before so there's the walk and the bike, and then the dogs come through after. So, and what you're saying about the mental fitness, the girl, I don't know her that well. Her name's Stevie Delahunt. I think she's quite well known now in the States. She teaches mental fitness to do these rides and kind of things as well. Because obviously that's a huge part of it. Being physically fit is like, does not equate to being mental fit. And
Right.
I remember when I first moved to New Zealand, I hadn't really done any long distance running or cycling, and I decided to do this 100-kilometer race, an example of what I'm talking about, and a bike ride, and the longest I'd ever trained was 40 kilometers, so not good. And so at about the 40-kilometer mark, I threw my mountain bike down, had a complete meltdown, started crying, sat on the floor, and then I realized, well, there's no Uber and there's no way out of this apart from me getting back on the bloody bike and like carrying on. And I had a few long distance rides where I was completely unprepared, like physically and mentally. But I finished pretty much, I think there was one I didn't finish because the mud was so deep we couldn't move. But all of the others, I struggled, the ones that I struggled in, I met some other people who were also in Struggle Town, and we kept each other going and finished. And although the times were abysmal, like you were saying, like you just want to do it because like, it's not about coming first. Well, definitely not for me anyway, like being in a top 3 or anything. It's just, an achievement to know that you can do that and still walk again. And after the ultra, actually, I mean, it's nothing compared with what you've done, but what you were saying about afterwards, I was really surprised because the reason I had to stop running is my muscles completely seized up on like lap 5 or something. But between each lap, I'd done lots of stretches, and I did lots of stretches afterwards. And even though I was sore, the next day I was kind of fine. I think because my body was just like, and brain was like lapping up all like the sun, winds, nature, really beautiful scenery and stuff. And so although it's quite hard physically, I think your brain can put, like, I was really surprised how much I could do, because it wasn't because I was really physically fit. Like your mental strength can make you do more than you realize when you're like pushed.
Right. And the mental strength makes you do more than what you realize, but then also you can, it's a mental capacity of believing in yourself and having that drive to be inspired to do that. You know, we can, most of what holds us back is going to be our mental attitude.
Definitely.
Sure.
Like your brain is your worst and best enemy.
Yeah.
But I think what you said about the flow as well is also really important, because everyone has their different thing when they're in the zone. And it's like at work, there's like workflow when you love what you're doing and time wishes.
Right.
But like you were saying with your 100-mile thing, like, it's like the miles kind of whooshed by and you didn't really notice because you were just loving everything. I think that's like the ultimate, like what we all like, especially with extreme sports, like, or well, at work, it's nice to be in flow and enjoy stuff. But like in physically being in that thing is like what we all aim for, because it's almost like a surreal thing, like your brain's floating along and it doesn't, even though, you are pushing your body's like, hey, your brain's like, hey, this is great. So your body's like, okay, we'll just carry on running then.
We'll just hop on board. I know, it's amazing. Doing 100 miles, doing 140 miles, your mind goes through so much stuff. There's so many things that go on in our mind, and it's like, and some of the stuff we're not even aware of. But when we can be in that zone and just be in the moment, it's amazing what you see around you. So many people are just focused on, oh, I got to get to the next this, I got to get to the next that, and what am I going to do this? But it's like if you look around, you take in the nature, and there's nothing more gratifying than being in nature and experiencing what you love. Because, I mean, what a gift for those guys out there that just were in that peace and calm, and they don't have the whole computers and the electronics and the world filling their brain with all this crap. They're going to live a nice long life. I want to go to 120. They're probably going to go to 180. Oh my gosh, Carolyn, thank you so much. What an amazing storyteller you've been, and sharing everything about you and your adventures, and how very, very inspiring. So thank you so much for being on this podcast.
Thank you for the opportunity, and lovely to meet you. And thank you to Deb for introducing us virtually.
Yeah, we shout out to Deb. We will send her the podcast too. And yes, shout out to Deb. We have something in common. So Deb is a mentor. Was a mentor for me, and I know she was a PQ. That's how we met. Was one of the PQ things. But I went on to the mastery of it, and she just kind of does it part of her program and does other stuff too. That's pretty awesome. Good for you. So thank you, Carolyn. I was gonna call you Deb. Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you so much.
Thank you.